Hello and welcome. I'm Çağlayan Arkan, Vice President of Manufacturing at Microsoft. This past year and a half has been hard. It has put an unimaginable strain on critical supply chains, stalled manufacturing operations, displaced our workforce. As I virtually spent time with manufacturers all over the world, one theme persists. Manufacturers are urgently looking toward the digital path forward. But we know that disruptions stemming from the pandemic era are here to stay, and every business needs to be on a digital journey. Only a few have figured it out yet, but the ones who have done so are creating dramatic gains in terms of productivity, agility, sustainability, and speed to market. They are resetting benchmarks. They are investing for the long term, from the factory to the supply chain to the workforce and beyond. Microsoft is proud to be a strategic partner to these companies, and all companies for that matter, to accelerate their digital transformation journeys. I want to spend our time today talking about ways your business can become more efficient and more resilient so that any future disruption, any future crisis does not interrupt your business. We do this by helping you take advantage of your existing investments through the power of data and the power of the cloud. I had the opportunity to sit down and talk about this with Ravi Krishnaswamy. As Corporate Vice President of the Azure Global Industry Portfolio, Ravi is obsessed with Microsoft and Azure becoming the best technology innovation partner for customers across industries who are embarking on their digital transformation journeys. I have the honor today to sit down with Ravi. Ravi, it's such an honor and pleasure to have you here with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with you, your role, your vision, and some of the bets that you're making.
Yeah, first off, let me start by saying that last year has been unprecedented here, both personally and and what India is going through, and my family, extended family, and friends going through in India, and what all our customers went through last year across all industries, including Microsoft. Right? I mean, we weren't untouched either. So we had to react and then respond and then figure out a growth strategy. And much of our customers did the same across all industries. So I think first and foremost, I want to acknowledge that. And I also want to look ahead as the economy is reopening. And in the post-pandemic reality, how do I also tailor my charter? Quickly just covering my vision and charter. At Microsoft, we have been, a platform leader from a technology infrastructure standpoint, technology innovation standpoint. That's the common DNA at Microsoft. As we look at industry, as we want to look ahead in the industry context in terms of digital transformation, how we can help our customers, it also became very clear that we need to sort of, leave our own comfort level at the, undifferentiated infrastructure. Absolutely. And also start going in the industry context, whether it means that, customizing the infrastructure for the industry context. For example, compliant industry is a great example. You can, FSI or healthcare. That's the start of the journey. And then, moving up the value chain, like how do you kind of help our industry customers and partner create a net new vibrant ecosystem in terms of bringing together a digital feedback loop, if you will, all through the value chain. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of been our mission statement, if you will, as we look at industry to industry. And it changes, from one industry to another slightly. But the common thread is how do you kind of, systems of record are plenty. How do you bring a system of insights, feedback loop together and help our enterprises compete in this experience-based consumer-led economy? And that's been our focus.
Yeah, and it's such a huge vision and mission in terms of, Satya from 2014 has always agitated with, we're going to move to a customer obsession culture. Right. And you're here to make that happen, essentially moving from tech out to customer value in. And industry is the context to think customer, right? Exactly. And you have such a broad perspective because you have multiple industries, some regulated, as you said, like FSI and health, and some not. Yes. What are the commonalities that you're kind of making big bets on? Because when you go from supply chain to value chain, actually, right, there are things that cuts across industries. Absolutely. How are you approaching this?
I think one common thread is kind of the connectedness of the entire data graph. But that aside, I think post-pandemic, as I alluded to, we all have to react and respond and figure out the growth strategy. So if you look at it, a lot of the direct-to-consumer trend that was there in the consumer goods, consumer perishable goods with the farm to fork, phenomena, those are all only accelerating. Even media entertainment, direct-to-consumer world is only accelerating in the post-pandemic world. Right. Even though production was virtually locked down, it's still the trends are accelerating. However horrific this pandemic has been, it has definitely gave us a bunch of tailwind, if you will, in terms of accelerating the underlying secular trend. So we are definitely looking at that, definitely looking to see per industry how to customize our offering and our thought process. But the fundamental thing being to compete in the new economy, what our customers need. And it comes down to connected data graph. And so all our obsession all around being customer centric around the needs and work with our partner ecosystem and put a cohesive strategy per industry. So that I would say is the common thread, if you will, but then I can go into more detail per industry.
Yeah, let's stay on data for a little bit. It's almost a cliche now to say that customers are using less than 1% of their data. Actually, as a manufacturer and supply chain ourselves, we woke up to that fact, a few years back, right? And so data, obviously, infinitely important, and then there's so much of it. So one, acceleration of cycles, right? Pandemic taught us no one has patience or budget for years of implementation, et cetera. So how do you get from data insights to outcomes very fast in a matter of almost weeks? Secondly, I talked about value chains, a much broader context. Like you have agriculture, you have so many industries that have 7, 8 industries in that value chain. So that common data, the open data, how are you approaching that whole notion of data? You made some acquisitions. I know you're thinking hard about this.
Right. No, excellent point. And having been an industry CTO myself, when I was at a Flipkart or in Mobi, these are all digital native companies out of India. One is B2C, a consumer commerce company. Another is the B2C or B2B2C, I should say, in terms of ad and MarTech networking company. So I am very familiar with the ROI and familiar with the too much data. There is no such thing as too much data, but if you are not really figuring out going from raw data to shovel-ready data to insights, you can drown in the volume. So I think we are very mindful of that. You refer to the acquisition, and yes, I think when I came back to Microsoft, one of the first things that I did was drive the data model company acquisition, a software company called ADRM Software, which has been a 30 year in the making, and they have a field-tested, fantastic data model across 75 verticals. So we are very fortunate to have them in the Microsoft family and offer that to our industry customers and partners. It's going to be the underpinning for Synapse, underpinning for Industry Cloud, every part of industry platforms that my team is building, essentially across Microsoft in the industry context. Why that is important? I think I talked about the too much data problem. First and foremost, you need to make the data shovel ready, and you need to have a point of view around data model. And it doesn't mean that you all need to unify all vendors into one data model, but it's very important to have a point of view so that you can actually create an ecosystem. So it could be a many-to-one mapping, if you will. But at the end of the day, just starting with the data model as the journey is the first step. And then bringing together an ecosystem, a consortium together, like infrastructure to manage that, a compliance around that, governance around that, and monetization around that as well. So we are thinking about all of that. How do you bring that in the industry context? And then the ultimate cool thing is to go to your point, to unlock the insights. And that's where our partner ecosystem will light this entire data graph up. And they are the ones with the industry context, and industry customers and partners will drive the value out of the data. What this organized data graph will give you is it will avoid this conundrum, right, in terms of too much data, and organize it in a way in which that right insight surfaces at the right time. And other part of my charter is to also organize it into industry platforms with insights embedded. So you're not going around like, looking at disparate islands, and you're able to just tap into it with the right solution that works for your application.
And actually, that's so important because it's one thing to look at your data and spend years on kind of contextualizing data, gathering data. It's another, perhaps it's the right approach, to start with the outcomes you want to change and find the relevant data to it. And those graphs actually will enable just that, in my view, right? Is that
Yeah,
a correct
absolutely.
understanding?
Absolutely, right? I mean, I think, I go back to my Flipkart example, right? Take a supply chain. Every supply chain is different. Like, those that have been part of that value chain, let me stick with e-commerce for a second. As an e-commerce outlet, you are offering different categories, but, a large object category, what you run for a TV supply chain will be very different from a refrigerator, will be different from a mobile phone, and so on. So I think being able to start with your objective, business objective, and walk back and see like how do you organize the entire ecosystem around that and drive through insights, the change is going to be paramount. And I think that's exactly where we are organizing ourselves to help our industry customers.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's really, I think it's going to be very much groundbreaking. And on that note, you mentioned supply chains, and you started with the disruptive nature of the pandemic, right? And what we've seen is a complete halt almost in so many different industries, right? And so going forward, supply chain visibility, supply chain resiliency, all of those are like top of mind for all executives, correct? And then what we saw in the U.S. is White House coming up with an executive order in terms of making sure U.S. has mitigated risks and ensured cybersecurity and looked at some of the critical industries, rare minerals and semiconductors and dealing with chip shortage, pharma and vaccination, et cetera, et cetera. So what are some of the things that we are doing from a supply chain resiliency, and how are we supporting the executive order?
Yeah, one more thing that I would add to that list is consumption pattern drastically varying, right? And who would have thought like a toilet paper to sanitizer to suddenly the resiliency that you talked about became so apparent, right? We weren't prepared. We weren't prepared with inventory in the right place. We weren't prepared even in the manufacturing capacity, right? Even the raw material. You referred to Biden's executive order, and so ultimately it comes down to resiliency at all level, right? And redundancy at the right level. I say right level because you can't be too redundant, because these are all capex heavy problem, right? If you are carrying too much inventory, glut of inventory, that again drowns your unit economics. So you need to be just right. But more importantly, you need to have that flexibility and agility in the way in which that you do the integrated planning, way in which that you do that placement and fulfillment optimization, and including the last mile optimization, and being able to react to the consumption pattern that again will change. When the economy opens, it's going to drive a different kind of consumption pattern, and this pandemic is going to be on and off with us, and so again, it'll just keep varying the consumption pattern. So there is no one size fits all. With that aside, I think what we are doing concretely with Biden's exec order that you referred to in terms of supply chain resilience and manufacturing resilience, ultimately I come down to the same thing, right? It's a first mile optimization problem, first mile, mid mile, last mile. And it again basically coming down to the connected graphness and then end-to-end resiliency in terms of how you real time drive optimization, starting with visibility that you referred to, but also with prediction, right? So in terms of that I've been referring to, right? In terms of demand forecast, gone at the level of doing at the monthly level or so years. So how are you able to do it just in time? And for that, you need to start the value chain way ahead. As manufacturer, you need to plan your input, right? How you are moving your raw material, how you are moving your partially finished goods all the way to retailer. And so all of that need to be thought down holistically as an integrated problem. Industry transformation, we have been referring to horizontal and vertical integrated manufacturing. Now it is here upon us. The real need is upon us. And those that react to will go a long way in terms of reacting to the new business model that is emerging and the new business market TAM opportunity that is in the making as well.
Virtually underlined, bold, italic, because you just alluded to $1 trillion issue. You're talking about being able to match creating that capability to match demand and supply.
Right.
And that is just not a solved problem for industries or for our large enterprise customers. So extremely exciting. Let's switch gears a little bit. We talked about yesterday and today. Looking forward, what I am seeing is sustainability is going to be key in any supply chain, and we're seeing a lot of energy there, but it's not really figured out how, et cetera, and I know you're keen on it as well. Yes. That's one of the things that you're spending a lot of brain power on.
One I'm personally passionate about as well, where I am in my career and giving back, if you will. No, but at sustainability, my conviction, Çağlayan, like you know this, I think sustainability has to be part of everything that you do. It cannot be a carbon calculator on the side. Your scope 2 becomes someone else's scope 3, and so I call it internally within my teams. I call it, let's build semantically aware sustainable livers. By that I mean, and take farm to fork as a phenomena that we refer to, right? The sustainability starts, or if you're a CPG manufacturer, your carbon footprint starts in the agricultural farms. Both carbon, you could be carbon positive, carbon negative, right? So net carbon negative industry if done right. So you do need to have digital visibility. Again, the real-timeness that I talked to, the integratedness that I talked to. And then once that is there, then you talk about supply chain, right? Where as you are moving goods, and as I talked about, your scope to become someone else's scope 3. So then how do you kind of, again, semantically be aware in everything you do? And if you're an energy company, if you're a hydrocarbon industry extracting carbon, how you sequester carbon, how do you, again, be responsible even in that industry? So it becomes an integrated problem in everything you do. And then the carbon footprint that you travel. And then now new business models are emerging, right? Customers like organic food was a category that was in the making a couple of decades ago. Now, carbon SKUs are in the making, right? And, a decade from now, we'll all be equally aware and demanding, maybe not even a decade. And so new business models emerge. And so my fundamental belief is that we have an opportunity to organize ourselves in a sustainable way in everything we do. And it cannot be afterthought. And again, data becomes gold there in terms of giving you the right insight, in terms of giving you the end-to-end visibility of how to optimize. My belief is, like you optimize for unit economics, you will optimize for carbon economics. And that's going to be the norm going into the future.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think food value chain is just an amazing example. It starts with the farm, transportation, milling, processing, distribution, warehouses, all the way to retail. In between, I have my machine builders, packaging, processing. It's just a fascinating example. And you talk about carbon, there's water, and there are other aspects of energy consumption. It's just fascinating to see Microsoft and you under your leadership addressing all of that. So any call to action for our customers and for our partners, Ravi, as we wrap this up?
I think we are all at unprecedented time reacting to COVID and post-COVID world, and the economy is reopening. And I alluded to a bunch of it. I think if I were to call out, it's reacting faster to the ever-shifting trends. The consumption pattern will continue to change. And one thing pandemic has taught us, consumer-led economy has taught us, is that the consumption pattern changing is something that everybody needs to be nimble to react in the entire value chain. So being able to organize yourself around the connectedness that I referred to, starting with the data model underpinning, normalize and start unlocking your data in ROI sensitive way. Start with a problem, and then start with this, the problem statement from a business standpoint and walk back. But invest in the right connectedness. Invest also in the unlocking the entire value chain's insights, as opposed to best of breed. And best of breed are so last year. So they kind of like bring the best of breeds together in a common connected platform, which is where my head is at, which is where my industry playbook is at. And as I look at our own future for Microsoft, how do we kind of help our customers and partner align to that vision and story, and being able to transfer that to reality for digital transformation for our end customers.
And for that, actually, I'm really excited about Microsoft Cloud for manufacturing and Microsoft Cloud for retail and health, etc. That is where we bring it all together and make it friction-free, make it easy to consume, make it affordable and accessible for everyone. That's That's amazing. And this is our first in-person gathering for a very, very long time. So I'm excited by that as well. So let's underpin that. Ravi, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.